Hello friends, welcome back. In today's video, we'll be discussing about how to use new and delete keywords for custom class objects. Previously, we have discussed about how to create variables on heap memory. For that, we learned how to use new and delete keyword. To be more specific, the new keyword was used to create a variable on heap memory, and then we use delete keyword to free the memory allocated by the new keyword. In today's video, we'll discuss about how to use new and delete keywords to manually allocate memory on heap for objects of class that we have created, namely cplx_numph. After today's video, we'll have a clear understanding about how to use new and delete keywords to allocate and deallocate heap memory for objects made out of custom class or types. Secondly, we'll learn how to access different member functions of objects for a custom class created using new keyword. Thirdly, we'll learn what is the implication of delete keyword on class destructor function. And finally, we'll also check the memory leak when we do not call delete keyword after creating an object using new keyword. And we'll examine the memory leak using the Valgrind software. So without further delay, let's get started writing the code. Okay, welcome back. So we'll start first including our header files. So we'll first include IO stream as before, and then we'll include the required header file for the class, and the name of the class is complex cls.h. But remember, we cannot use those kind of arrow brackets. Instead, we need to use the inverted commas because this is a custom made header file. Next, we'll start our main function, and in main we will first create our object using the new keyword. So for that, we'll type the name of the class, which is cplx, then num, after that we will create the name of the variable, which is cp suppose num1, and then we'll type the new keyword. After that, we'll call the class name, which is cplx_num, and this constructor takes two input arguments, one for the real variable, another one is for the imaginary part of the variable. So we are providing 4.2 and 5.0. Next, we see that now that we have created our variable cp num1, which is created on heap since we have created it using the new keyword. However, notice that we forgot to use a pointer or the dereference operator here, because cp num1 will be a pointer to the memory. So we need to use this asterisk operator. Okay, and once we have that class object created, so we will be allocating some memory on the heap. So in order to free the memory or deallocate the memory that we just created, we need to use delete keyword, and then we need to create cp num1. Now we'll compile this code. G++ dash st t is equal to c++ 11. Then the output, which we name as run, and we want to compile the code named main.cpp, which also depends on complex cls.cpp. As we can see that the code has compiled. Now let's run the executable, and we see that the code compiles and runs, and it calls destructor is called. So the destructor was called for this function for this code. However, if we now comment out this line number 6, where we have used the delete keyword, so if we do not free the memory, then if we run the executable afterward, we see that the destructor was not called for this class. That means until we call the delete, the memory will still be allocated or remain on the heap that we manually have created using new keyword. So the destructor will not be called. So in order to destruct this object or free the memory, we first need to call the delete keyword and then the name of the object that we just created. And after that, the memory will be freed, and then the destructor will be called. Then the variable goes out of scope and the destructor will be called. I think this is clear. Now that this cpnum1, we know that this is a pointer to a memory on heap. So if we want to suppose access to our to figure out what is the real value and imaginary value of this complex number, we need to call the member methods, which we named as getReal, to retrieve the real value of the complex number. However, notice that we have used arrow operator here because we know that this cpnum1 is a pointer. So whenever we need to call any member function of this object, we need to use arrow operator. So let's print that out, and we'll see what we get. We'll probably also be interested in finding out what is the imaginary value. So for that, we also want to call getImg method. So the main takeaway here is that, okay, first let's compile the code and we'll see the output first. We see that the real is 4 as expected, and the imaginary part of that complex number is 5. So those numbers are printed properly, and then the destructor was called since we have this delete keyword before the cpnum variable, cpnum1 variable. So we are completely good here. However, before we wrap up, we also want to see what is the memory leak situation when we do not use the delete keyword after creating the object using new. So we'll compile the code again, and then we called valgrind method, and then if we run the executable, it says that in the leak summary that we have definitely lost 8 bytes. 8 bytes because 4 bytes for real number and 4 bytes for imaginary number. So that's why we have 8 bytes that we have lost. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll now call the delete and then recompile the code, and now we call valgrind on the new executable that we just created, and it shows that there is no loss of memory right now. So we properly created the variable named cpnum1 using new keyword on heap, and then once we are done working with that variable, we use delete keyword to free the memory. And since whenever we use new, the variable is that we get is a pointer to the memory, so whenever we want to call the class member methods, we need to use this arrow operator instead of dot. So I think this discussion will be helpful to understand how new and delete keywords are used on objects of custom classes. Thank you. Okay, now that we have learned how to use new and delete keywords for objects of the custom class, next we'll look at how to use new and delete keywords when you want to create an array object of custom class types. So now we'll be allocating memory for an array which will hold multiple instances of the custom class objects. And then we'll see how to delete that allocated memory using delete keywords. So what we want here is that we want to create an array of objects of type cplxnum, and the size of that array is suppose 5. And the way we create that array is we first use the name of the class of the objects that the array will be holding, and then the name of the array, then we use the new keyword, and then the name of the class. The name of the class is cplxnum, and then we provide the size of the array. In our case, suppose we want to create an array of length 5, and each of the cells of that array will hold an object of type cplxnum. And then if we need to deallocate that memory of after we create the cpnum array, we need to delete it in this way. So we still type delete keyword and then we use the square bracket, and then we provide the name cpnum. Okay, so let's now compile the code what we just did before, and it compiles, and then run the executable. As we can see that the destructor was called 5 times because we allocated the memory for 5 cplxnum type object, and when we called the delete keyword using this square bracket, the entire array of those 5 objects was deleted, and that's why destructor was called 5 times. So I think this will help you to understand how to call new and delete, how to use new and delete keywords to create an array of objects of custom made classes. Thank you.